All right, I'm a little rusty, but what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Panels on Pages. My name is Dalibor Zujovic. I am the indie hype man, and I am joined today by someone who I'm beginning to call friend. I'll be honest with you. I talk to this guy a lot now. We share many interests. We're old school '90s guys, and he's a big fan of the Wizard magazine, and I am also a big fan of the Wizard magazine. Adam Pope of Wizards, the podcast guide to comics. Adam, how you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be here. Yeah, super excited about your recent Wizard haul you picked up. I was like,
It's right
oh,
here. It's
stuff.
right here. It's hefty. I think actually some of them, the couple older ones, like the early issues, they're like my first opening of them. I've never held them in hand, so
Wow.
it's kind of cool. So today, I've been meaning to make this video for a while. It was going to be kind of a solo rant thing, and then I was listening to the most recent episode of Wizards for issue 89, and you were talking about the fact that a lot of people kind of relied on Wizard. So even in the 90s, leading into the end of the 90s, people were looking at Wizard as like this official source of information. And, like it was law, if it was in Wizard, it was fact. There's no questions, there's no debate. And I feel like a lot of that has just like come through into the modern age, except now there's almost no fact. Everything is speculation. And we just have a whole era of people arguing about like opinion and presenting it as fact. So I wanted to kind of dig into that. And I wanted to start with the classic, the originator, the Wizard Price Guide for comic books right here, December 1991. And they always used to have this intro here, and it makes it sound very official, right? We have compiled values from comic book dealers throughout the world to present to you the most precise and accurate comic book price guide. And that sounds serious, right? But from talking with people who actually worked there, more often than not, they were just calling shops around New York and being like, hey, what are you selling this for?
Well, they had a network, so they did do their best to have a nationwide network. We talked to the price guide manager at one point who was telling us, like, yeah, look, we compiled as best as we could on a monthly basis, but yeah, they're not talking to every single shop in every single state in the US, and maybe they were reaching out to Canada too. That's possible, but it just seemed like, yeah, they're like, this is the average that we're getting, and I think often people were saying like, well, they're obviously just inflating it to sell them for more in the family store that the Seamuses had or whatever, because they want to lift up this creator that they're going to offer a half issue for or whatever. And people
Right.
kind of start having the conspiracy in their minds that Wizard was, manipulating. Now, do I think they gave preference to certain creators that they felt they could get a lot of content out of? Absolutely. But when it comes to the price guide, like at least from what I've heard, everybody I've talked to, there was nothing devious on the editorial side. They were doing their best, but certainly they wanted to make other books, whether or not in the price guide they listed them as more valuable, seem more popular than others.
Yeah, because there was always even this is issue 4. Even in this, you've got your standouts, right? They pull out the bigger cover image for certain issues, and more often than not, those issues were a little bit higher priced. So it was like, hey, look at this thing that costs more money. It's not your cover price book. This is a special book. And there was always kind of, it may not have been devious, and even if they were doing their best, I'm sure people were going to their local shop in some podunk Missouri town and being like, well, with the pricing here, does it match the Wizard, And then I'm sure that caused some strife. And I can imagine they got countless letters.
Yeah, and we've talked to multiple comic book store owners. Like one of them actually worked with Wizard in their toy guide section at one time, and then another was just a fan of the magazine who. But they said that was often the case. Is people were saying, "Well, this is what Wizard says it's worth." It's like, yeah, but that's not regionally what we're experiencing. That demand, no, like it's not
Right.
that rare as they're telling you here. So yeah.
Yes, like you were saying, they highlighted certain creators, and whether it was for self-serving purposes, like, oh, next month they're going to have it one half or whatever, they were preferring certain creators in certain books, and that puts a perspective on things, right? So it's like they say, "Oh, you know what? Jim Lee's doing real good, and like he's got a lot of books, or he's a friend. He like jokes around with us. We steal his bathrobe or towel or whatever it was." It's like, but this thing happens. It's like we're going to talk about Jim Lee a lot. Was Jim Lee selling the most books? Was Jim Lee making the most? No, but it sure seemed like he was one of the hottest ones because he was a buddy. If you have me on all the time on the Wizards podcast, it's gonna seem like I'm way more important than I am in the social sphere, because you guys are big and I'm just some dude, and they're like, wait, well, this guy's always on. Maybe he's on. Maybe he's got something going on. There's gonna be a perception. So it's like there's always it's who you know, and it's the way things are presented. It's not everything is fact. Saying that you were just talking about Battle Chasers, saying that Battle Chasers #1 sold the most. It wasn't the hottest book for all time. It took the spot for 1 month, but they sure talked about it for several issues. They talked about it for 4 or 5 months. Hey, this book is still super hot. Yeah, but I've come across that whole run countless times.
Yeah, and I think it's a different era now where I think, there are some sites that claim to really have the actual sales data and they just put up the sales data for you and you could just analyze it yourself.
Right,
Back in the day, again, Wizard is just doing their best. Even, like when you look at the traditional price guide, the Overstreet that they're compiling for an entire year's worth of sales, and who are they pulling from? Like, are
right.
people calling into question what they're. And I think it was just like when you get popular and you get very visible, everybody's going to be like, okay, but I tried to get my book sold for what you told me it was worth and it didn't work. So now I'm a little bitter and now I'm pointing fingers at you, Wizard. It's that kind of thing. But even like, um, you know, if you think about like what you're saying, where the people they were giving preference to, like I call into question somebody like Randy Queen. Randy Queen was like jumping all these different studios with Darkchild, and they made it seem like it was the biggest book. They're doing contests for Darkchild. They're doing a Darkchild half issue. He just seemed like he was a cool guy who was a good hang, and they liked having him around. So they're
Yeah.
gonna promote his book. To your point. But I was just like, if you mention Darkchild to anybody, I think there's a very, very small, even people who are buying a lot of comics in the 90s that are going to say, oh, yeah, that was a huge book. I always saw it in Wizard. Well, you may have already always seen it in Wizard, but was it really a sales juggernaut the way, again, the perception is if it's in Wizard, it must be big, but definitely not the case.
And especially, I mean, that book did not make it into the new millennium with any sort of demand. I mean, I've come across, a signed, Randy Queen signed Darkchild Chrome variant or something, and I'm like, let me just throw it up on eBay. I'll pick it up, throw it up on eBay, let's see what happens. Because I don't think I've ever read an actual issue. I was a horny teen, so I was like, this is a hot chick. I'm into this book. That's what it was about. I was like, oh, there's like cool demons and a hot chick. This is awesome. But I don't think I've literally ever read the book, and the demand just isn't there. I put up a like signed Dark Child, almost never moves. I don't think I've actually ever sold it. Once in a while, I get a couple watchers, but no one ever bids. So
Yeah.
it's like there is no demand. But I've put up stuff. What did I just put up? Something. I put up a run of something. It was like, oh, the Excalibur, right? Granted, wait, like completely different scope of book. But like I put up the collected edition of Excalibur because I decided to go omnibus. I put it up for a very fair price. All the collected editions, and it was $60, $10 a book, dirt cheap comparatively to what you're going to buy it for anywhere else. And someone comes in and tries to like undercut me. And I was like, absolutely not. I know it's going to sell for more. And I end up getting $100 for it. Three guys kept going back and forth. All this happened without me promoting it, without me doing anything. Whereas something like a Darkchild, something like several books from the 90s, let's be serious, they just sit there. No one's talking about them. No one's bringing up Darkchild in the conversation unless we're discussing an archival history of comic books.
Yeah,
It,
well, it's interesting because we talk about it and we're not demeaning
right.
Dark Child. We're looking at it from the perspective of, okay, we saw the hype, but did the hype play out? And it doesn't seem like it did because it did not last in the consciousness of fans. But that being said, there are probably some very dedicated Randy Queen fans, some
Of
people
course.
who really thought Darkchild was like the coolest concept. Why is he not doing more? Why is it not like, getting more? Why is it not a TV show now? Like that type of thing. Like they're passionate about it, and that's great. Like you can love what you love. That's the thing about the hobby of comics, right? Is you can love any type of thing, and then we kind of get a little tribal and territorial about the things that we like. And that's where you
So
start getting
incredibly.
into the issues, I think.
And that's literally, I spent all of today at work. It was a slow day, but I kept going back and forth with these kids on Facebook about the X-Men, the animated series, the X-Men 97, the new kind of season of it. And I'm a guy who accepts that the person driving the car gets to decide where we're going. I'm not. I might have a suggestion. I might have an opinion. End of the day, whoever's holding the wheel has their foot on the pedal decides where we're going. So if the story goes a way I didn't want it to, or a way I didn't expect it to, or I didn't even, that's not up to me, right? I'm not making that cartoon. So the fact that they changed Morph to his more comic book like appearance, the fact that the fact that Morph is non-binary now, they've explicitly said it. A lot of people are like, oh my goodness, this is you're not making the show. It's not your show. It's not your characters. That's the whole premise. If you don't like it, don't watch it, don't consume it. And if you really must, go see something else. Watch something else and just let people enjoy it. Because like you said, we get tribal. And I'm just like, I'm arguing with this kid. And I'm like, why am I doing this? What like I'm not gonna convince this dude that he's gonna like the show. So why am I wasting my time? I'm still excited for the show. He's not going to convince me to not like it. So we're in these two diametrically opposed positions. Who cares?
Yeah. Like it's very hard to convince somebody that objectively the artistic endeavor that they have decided entertains them and they get joy from, to tell them it's bad and it's wrong and it's not good, so you should stop enjoying it. It's just like, number one, why do you want to take away somebody's joy from that thing? It's not hurting anybody. Like, why do you have to do that? But also the idea of just like, okay, are you doing it because it somehow elevates what you like more? Like, if you like Todd McFarlane, and his Spider-Man more than you like John Romita Sr.'s Spider-Man, and you look at that.
No
So,
one does. No one
yeah.
anywhere does.
But yeah,
Impossible.
I mean, but that's the thing, right? It's two different styles, and that's what it comes down to. Is some people are very attached to, like McFarlane. I'm like, it's iconic. Oh,
I can't. It's my episode, and I didn't. I didn't mute my stuff.
but I think it comes down to, okay, so some people were there when their fandom for comics started. All of a sudden, there's Todd McFarlane breaking the mold, giving you a super out there Spider-Man, but it's fun and it's exciting. So that's for you. Now you say, okay, and he had a good year, a couple year run. Like he stayed on Spider-Man. He gave you a lot of stories to enjoy. But then, John Romita Sr. in his era, he was coming in, he was like streamlining the look of Spider-Man. He really made him, heroic and handsome, very different than the Steve Ditko version.
Yeah.
And then when you go from there and say like Mark Bagley, totally different version, but he was very prolific, I feel, during my era of collecting. So like I'll
Yeah.
associate Spider-Man with Mark Bagley, and I'm like, I love his Spider-Man. And then I don't have to then, say to everybody, oh, well, but your Spider-Man's not good. Let's pick the best Spider-Man. And Wizard, unfortunately, was, we live in an era now of lists and top 10 lists, and everything has to be judged against another thing, especially artistic endeavors, like
Yeah.
movies or TV or whatever. And so Wizard, unfortunately, fueled a lot of that because they kind of created that culture of, here's the top 10 best stories ever written, like in comics, or here's the top 10 best villains, or, whatever it's going to be. And that was like, and literally in their magazine every month they had 5 or 6 top 10 lists. One was like a David Letterman style joke list. One was top 10 heroes and villains, top 10 creators, top 10 comics. Like they just, everything was top 10. So they're giving the rankings over and over again, assigning a value to somebody. Now, some of it was sales based, but most of it was opinion. their opinion in-house, the editorial staff, and then I'm sure they were again hearing from the other comic book stores that they were reaching out to and in contact with what was selling, what wasn't. But it's just like ultimately, what I always say is it's a glorified fanzine. This is what they wanted to write about. These are their opinions. They
Yep.
were running the magazine. They got to put it out there.
That's the thing is it was the most organized Twitter feed. It's retrospectively, it was just a really well organized Twitter feed. A curated Twitter feed of people who for the most part agreed with each other. Like most of those people that worked there kind of had very similar leaning feelings on most characters, most creators. So there wasn't a lot of, at least in the book, in the magazine, maybe behind the scenes, but there didn't seem to be a lot of like, one person writes John Romita Jr. He's the hottest Spider-Man artist of all time, and then the next person writing why John Romita Jr. isn't the best artist of Spider-Man. That just didn't really happen. It was like we're gonna promote this, like everything was mostly hyping somebody up. Very rarely was there like a this person is just bad at their job, but like a lot of people had taken that energy and have come into the present day and with social media. And this is why I always say, as much as I love the internet, I mean, this is on the internet, but meeting you was on the internet. The likelihood of us meeting in person without the internet, almost nil. And so I love the internet, but the internet also gave the perception to everyone that their opinion matters to everyone. Not that it doesn't matter at all, because your opinion is your opinion, and you may have people that agree with you, but everyone has a perception that their opinion matters to everyone, and that their opinion it can be right or wrong. And that's where we keep getting messed up, is a lot of people will be like, like constantly on Twitter there's discussions about the MCU, and it's like, right, but the MCU's fallen off since Endgame. But for you, like that's if we could just add that for me before at the end of sentences, I feel like a lot of arguments would stop.
Yeah, well, the Marvels might be a jumping on point for somebody now, just like, there are books that like I have, in doing the podcast and going back to the 90s and certain books that Wizard would highlight. So we're going to review them, we're going to talk about them. Like I've realized where my sweet spot is, and it's definitely not black and white indie comics about 20 somethings talking to each other about their love lives. That's not for me. Like
Right.
there's a book called Box Office Poison. There were Wizard, editors that loved that book, so it kept popping up
I
in the
do remember that
magazine.
being brought up.
Yeah, and so like they get full articles, they'd end up, profiled and stuff. And I went and I read it and I was just like, this is frustrating to me because my preference for comic book entertainment is out there, like heroic endeavors. They can be complicated, they can be flawed, but like, I want them to have outlandish powers. I want them to be in crazy settings and things like that. So to just read about somebody that I could meet at a dinner party somewhere or just run into at the grocery store, they're going to tell me about their life, but that's written in comic book form. I don't want to spend my money on that. Now, I know a lot of people like that type of thing. They just want like, all the fun, interesting characters to them that I don't find interesting. I've had to edit myself in the past on the podcast and re-record a review because I'm like, I'm getting too riled up about this thing because it's not entertaining me. I have some sort of expectation in my mind what a comic book could be, even though I understand there's so many different genres,
Right.
within. But like when I go to something like that and somebody's telling me it's great, I'm like, it's not working for me, but I don't need to get upset about it and degrade the book and say it's
Right.
it's terrible because of this, it's terrible because of this. I just say it's really, really not for me. So don't keep offering it to me. That type
Right.
of thing.
Yeah, and I completely understand that because I've had the same experience. Slice of life is so far removed from what I like that I don't it's hard for me to read slice of life. And there is a whole community of people on the internet that, for instance, want the Bat Family, but like as like a family adventure thing, like slice of life Bat Family. And I'm like, right, but that's not what it's about. But again, for me, Batman is not about like it's about him trying to do his best in the context of all the terrible things. And but DC realized, hey, there is an audience for this. People are making their own little animes, their little fan drawings and stuff of like the Bat family having dinner. So then they did a webtoon of the Bat Family Adventures, an official DC production. It was on webtoons, and I think they eventually put it out as a physical comic as well. And it's a slice of life, obviously non-canon, but still a slice of life Batman book. And people read it. People talked about it a lot. And I was like, I mean, yeah. And I always say, if there's an audience for it, make it. I don't care. If I don't read all the titty books that are on Kickstarter. Well, people do, or at least they buy them. I don't know if they're reading them, but like, it's like it's not all for me. Some of them are interesting. I have some of them. There's a book called what's his face? Pat Shand. His stuff is really interesting. He's got a book called Smoke Weed, See the Future. It's like I was like, okay, I'm interested in this concept. What else is going on? And it's a black and white indie comic, mostly like drama, but like it's mostly like slice of life kind of stuff. But it's in this context of like they see the future, they like are changing their decisions and stuff based on the stuff that they see. And I'm like, okay, like this is more interesting to me because it's like there were TV shows that are like that. There was a show called Flash Forward that only got one season because it was like during the 2009 writer's strike, which sucked because I really think it should have deserved a season two. But like that was the whole premise of that show. It was just regular people doing regular stuff. But the beginning of the show was for 2 minutes and like 47 seconds or something. The entire planet blacked out and saw 1 year ahead. That was the whole concept. And then it was just like cops and people dealing with like, where was our marriage a year from now? What happened? Like, how could you cheat on me? People dealing with the fact that they didn't see anything, so they were going to die. It's all just regular life stuff, but in the context of this sci-fi thing. And I love the show. So it's like for me, it doesn't take much to get me into reading the slice of life. But for certain things like the Bat Family, I don't like it, but other people love that shit. How am I going to be like, that's not what Batman's about? You shouldn't read that. This is stupid. That's ignorant. If you like it, like it. God bless. Like you're reading comics. That's all I care about.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too, I think that is we have to be more accepting, especially of new fans and
Oh
people
yeah.
of different eras, because like the idea, like go back to Wizard, like recently, like in that on that episode you referenced, Peter David calls them out because he's just like, you did a top 10, or top 25 greatest moments in comics history, and only two of them were before 1979. So
Right.
everything you said was written in the 80s, basically, and maybe early 90s. And so he was just like, how can that be when there's like 60 years of comics history at this point, and you're only saying this is the time period that matters? And so like the idea of saying, well, you're not a real comic book fan if you don't recognize that Jack Kirby did this and this guy did this and this guy did that. And it's like those historical reference points are great, but if somebody's just coming in because the way comics are at this moment
Right.
excites them, then that is like their idea of what it is. Like if somebody comes to me and says, well, Dan Jurgens is not the greatest Superman artist of all time, I'm like, again, that's your opinion.
Sure.
Like they're like, well, it's obviously Kurt Swan because he drew him for longer than anybody, and he really, like also like that's an accomplishment. That's great. But to me, my definitive, Superman is drawn by Dan Jurgens because that's what I was really reading the comics and
Right.
enjoying those stories. And so I think it's so important that we try to have a little, I don't think empathy is the right word, but a little understanding of where the other person is coming from, and that again, it doesn't diminish what we like by them saying, well, I like this new exciting thing, and then
Right.
then you say, well, you don't even understand where that came from and what influenced it. You don't get this. And it's just like they don't have to be a historian to enjoy comics. Like that might come from
Right.
excitement. Like I know you and I both, we like to go back. We like to look and see, okay, this connects to this, and this guy worked on this, and then this, okay, I see now where the history of this story came from. But that's not for everybody. A lot of people are
Right.
just into the new. What's the new? Okay, I want the new and I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny that you say that. Like my buddy JT, he's been on the show before. He's an indie creator, and they're doing a whole X-Men relaunch like they always do. Uh, and the art has been released and the promos have come out, and he posted something on his Facebook page, and he said, "Hey, this actually looks exciting. I might pick up an X-Men book for the first time in 20 years." And my reply to him was, "Well, I think this most recent run was the best thing that's happened in 20 years, so I think you've missed out. But if this gets you like," and what's funny is I didn't say this, but like I feel like I hope he knows. I might need to follow up on that post, honestly. Because again, I'm still trying to like catch myself in these moments of like, I think you're wrong. It doesn't matter if I think you're wrong, ultimately. Like I think this most recent era was great. Not a lot of people agree. Okay, fine. If this new era is great for them, awesome. I'm doing my best to not shit on this new stuff. I personally do not like the new Cyclops design, but that's me. A lot of people are excited about it. Cool. If that gets you to buy X-Men, if that gets you to read comics, I'm in. I'm in. I'm in. I don't really care why. Well, in certain aspects, there are certain characters that I do care why, because they're like they do stand for a certain kind of mentality. The Punisher is one of those. I need to know why you're reading The Punisher and what about it appeals to you, because that's a particular kind of book.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, I think is something that maybe we don't consider often, like when it's like our opinion on what like the best. Again, the best is very
Yeah.
subjective, but like the best way to collect comics, or even that you need to be a collector
Oh
to call
yeah.
yourself a comic book fan, right? Like you have to have physical issues, or you have to have like every action figure that's released or whatever. Because like for me, I will only buy a comic, and I've always been this way. I will only buy a comic if I intend to read it cover to cover. If I know there's a story in there I want to read. I've never bought a comic just because I want the cover art. But there's a huge percentage of comic book fans
Oh
and
yeah.
collectors. They're just in it for the art. They're literally, they see the cover, they never have to open it. They're like, oh, that's Jason Fabok, who's, again, I don't know his work, but I hear his name all the time. And we are like, I gotta get this, or what is
People,
Spider-Man is being drawn by J. Scott Campbell this issue. I got to get that one. Like that kind of stuff. I'm like, I would never do that. I feel like I'm throwing away my money if all I'm doing is looking at an image, and if I wouldn't go back and reread it over and over again. And I know some people, it's like, well, you got to take a chance on a comic to find out if you like it. It's like, I could do that in other ways, I guess. But like, I guess it's just important that we say like, okay, you like it for the art, maybe you're in it for the stories. Like I'm in it for the stories, but I don't read novels. I still want it in a graphic way.
right.
I want the marriage of the two forms, but it's just like, and some people, they just like the movies. You like comic book movies that came from comic book source material? Good for you. That's your world. That's, you don't have to read every issue to catch up to the original history of that character and then be able to debate it with other people and what they changed. If you want to, great. But it
Right.
doesn't make you less of a fan of that character just because the movies are your reference point. Because even the comic continuity isn't a thing anymore, hardly. Like there's, like you said, this little niche group likes this type of story. Okay, that's a whole separate universe now, and they get their whole line of books
Right.
based on that. It's just like it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something I try to very much stay away from, because I know like early in the MCU era, I'd be like, what do you mean? This is from this comic. How do you not know this? Like, why wouldn't you just read the comic and know better? And then I'm like, well, what the hell does it matter, really? Like there was a time where I was like kind of sketchy on people who were like, I only have reference for X-Men from the cartoon. I mean, okay. But now I'm like, who cares? If that's all they had time for or money for or whatever, the X-Men came for free on TV. Maybe they didn't have money to buy comics. Maybe they didn't have time to buy comics. Like there's so many factors that it ultimately doesn't matter as long as they're enjoying the thing. If they like the original animated series and they don't like the new one, or if they like the original, or like there's a lot of people who watched what was it, the second one, Evolution, X-Men Evolution was the second series, never watched the original. And in my mind, I'm like, that's insane. I don't even know how you could do that. But to them, that's X-Men. So cool. That's your experience. And like it's all valid, because it's the thing I always like to go back to with a lot of different different parts of life, honestly, this happens a lot, is both can be true. That is the X-Men for that person. This whole thing over here is the X-Men for me. I've got omnibuses, I've got alternate realities, and it's like the people who were like, oh, this something something multiverse, and this is too much, and I'm like, I've been reading multiverse for 40 years. It's all multiverse to me. Like I watched a video today where somebody was discussing whether Mixius Pitlick is the same Mixius Pitlick in all of media. And I'm like, this is fascinating to me. This is right up my alley. But I'm sure there's a ton of people who saw that. I'm like, who the fuck cares?
Yeah, and I think it's just, are we, what I see, and it might not be accurate, but it feels like actual comic book readership is dwindling. It's guys our age still going to the comic book shops, keeping it alive, right? Like the new kids that are coming in, I know they always have sections with a lot of manga and a lot of, like, the Pokemon stuff and the Sonic comics and whatever for that younger generation. But like whenever I go into a store, generally speaking, it's people my age and older that are milling around and grabbing stuff. And so, like, do we want to be inclusive, or are we trying to be gatekeepers to say, like, this is the right way, whippersnapper, like this
Yeah.
is this, like, do you want to be that guy? Don't be that guy, like, again, like, let everybody enjoy it. But I think I'm curious to get your thought on this for the perspective of people who um they when they want to have a discussion, because if you're passionate about something, you want to talk about it with other
Yeah.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you come at it, your passionate fandom is combative. You come at it like it's a challenge to convince this person that they have
Right.
to love what you love so hard. Like just after this episode 89, it was very controversial because the guest that we had on is a friend of mine who loves having takes. And they're not hot takes, they're honest takes from
Right.
him. But they tend to rile people up because he's just like, I'm like, he talks about J. Scott Campbell. He's like, he doesn't do comics anymore. He only does covers. And I loved him when he did comics, and I wanted that back. But the
Can I
way he
tell you,
says it,
I
yeah.
had the most, I felt seen and heard for the first time in ages when I heard him talk about that. I also want Wildsiders #2. Like I want that book. It was such a cool concept. And I've been saying for years now, like since the the whole thing with J. Scott Campbell, people like correcting his art or whatever, that whole nonsense. Like I'm like, he's not my kind of artist anymore. He does his thing. He's got his market. He draws sexy girls on variant covers that Marvel and DC provide for him to sell, and that's where he makes his money. God bless you. Have your audience. I've got nothing to do with that. Like you said, these people are buying it for the cover. They're not even going to read that book, most likely. That's not even the kind of people I'm going to be hanging out with. I'm the same way with people who slab. I don't understand slabbing in the lightest bit. Like I don't how like you're buying a comic book. It's a story, and you're just gonna put it in a piece of plastic and stare at it, dust it off once in a while for the potential perceived value based on like 100 different factors across the media spectrum. No, I don't get that at all. But that's what people enjoy. Maybe it's a money thing, maybe it's a little bit of feels like gambling or whatever, whatever it is for them, that's what it is, and that's how they enjoy it. I absolutely agree with you because it's you should be able to have an opinion and not have to defend yourself. Like there's lots of people who put stuff on social that are just like, I didn't really like this issue of whatever. And people will come out, oh, you're just hating on this character. You're just hating on. Well, I just said I didn't like this issue. I didn't like the way this particular bit was written, and it automatically turns into you hate this, and then people who are like staunch fans want to defend it, want to justify why it's good, why it actually makes really important sense at the end there, like any number of things, I feel like it happened with She-Hulk, right? She-Hulk, I think was a good show. I did not like the ending as much as I could have if they had done it differently. I would have approached it differently. But again, like I said at the beginning, it's not my car. I'm not driving. We got to a weird restaurant, but like, I guess this is what we're eating. Like, you
Well,
know,
yeah, I think when we have something that we love, we don't need to feel attacked when someone else isn't on board with that. Like, or like, for example, like I feel bad for my co-host. I don't think he's checked our social media recently, but somebody came after him because he said, I have no idea who Joe Madureira is. I didn't read his comics at the time. They obviously didn't catch my attention. So we're
right,
talking about him so much on the podcast, but I don't know who he is. And then someone comes after him and says, how could you call yourself a comic book fan and not know who Joe Madureira is? Or, like I said, I couldn't recognize his art on a poster of Superman because the signature was cut off. And
right.
everybody's like, how could you, an idiot could know that was Joe Madureira art? I'm like, I thought it was Todd Knock. He's the closest. Like, a lot of people had that style at the time. So like we don't need to be like, I know you love him and you can identify every little bit of the thing this artist has done. That's awesome. But I'm not coming after you by saying I don't understand it and I don't know it. So
Right.
like we need to be able to have a little bit of a sense of humor with ourselves too, because like I know I like some crap. Like, so not my taste is not like the most like beloved, like, and so like I can read some stuff and say, well, yeah, I mean, this is objectively a lame comic, but I mean, I get a lot of entertainment value out of it, and I'll pick on things I think are a little bit lame, but I'm not trying to destroy it for somebody. I'm just saying this kind of didn't make sense to me. What about you?
Right. And that's the thing that see, like you said that, like that's objectively a whatever a lame comic. But this is the one thing that I've been like I hit this wall with a lot of people when I talk to them all the time. They're like, oh, this was an objectively bad movie. There's no such thing. Art, by its nature, is subjective. There
Yeah.
is no objective truth about art. Because even if the creator says it was supposed to look like this is supposed to be a cat, you see it, well, it looks like a giraffe. To you, it looks like a giraffe. There's nothing. That's it. That's the entire exchange. There's no correct answer because it's art. It's perception based. It's I have. There's been movies I've watched. There's been comics I've read that I read it in one mindset at a different age, and read it in another mindset in a different age, and it's entirely different book, completely different comic book. I remember reading the first X-Men Forever, where they like try to do some like continuity cleanup, which I thought was hilarious. Like, and now I think it's really funny that they like made a book really just strictly to try and clean up continuity issues. But like, I remember reading it the first time, and I was like, "This is a lame book." Like, some of this stuff, I don't understand. I don't understand these references. I don't really care. And like, the only thing that came out of it for me at the time was spoiler alert for a 20-year-old book. Uh, was that we found out that Mystique shot Graydon, that Mystique shot Robert Kelly. No, not Robert Kelly. That was Graydon Creek. Yeah, it was Graydon Creek because he was running for president. So she shot Graydon. She shot her son. We like got confirmation. Everyone thought that it was kind of the running theory for years, but we finally got confirmation. That was the only thing I got from it at the time. 20 years later, I reread it, part of the omnibus. I'm reading it, and I have way more information about the X-Men. I have a lot more lived life, a whole different perspective on life and everything about it. I'm reading it, and I was like, wow, this is actually a good book. It's actually a good run. And then, I don't know if I brought this up to you before, but I brought it up before on the pod. The book itself had like really fun process things that just made me chuckle because they ended up having to scan pages of the actual comic because they lost some of the files. So I go from like really nicely like reprinted pages to a literal scanned copy of an issue of a comic book. And I was like, wait, what the hell just happened? And they had to do it for like a whole issue in that run. And I was like, even as big a corporation as Marvel was, even then, let alone now, they had a data failure. They lost files. This is crazy. Like, I just like, it's a process thing. I'm a process junkie. So like that to me was just like an additional goofy thing that I got to enjoy out of the whole process, the whole reading of that book. But it's like none of that would have mattered to me 20 years ago. If I had gotten a trade paperback of that and it looked like they had copied, like just copied a page instead of reprinting it properly, I'd be like, why is it so shitty? I spent money on this, like I was a different kid. So like to say that anything is true permanently. I mean, there were people who up until 3 months ago would have fought me to a bloody pulp. Not me. They would be, I'm saying, but they would have fought me physically if I had stood up for the Chuck Austin run of Uncanny X-Men. People hated that run with a fervor. You brought it up, and that would be like the worst thing ever to happen to X-Men. The Draco is a universally hated story. And I was like, well, it's not universally hated. I liked it. So it's not universally hated. So if only me liked it. And then they make Mystique Nightcrawler's biological father. Oh, but the Draco established that Azazel is his father. What about the Draco? Let's go back to the Draco. I thought everyone hated the Draco. I thought we all hated Azazel. I thought it was universally despised. What happened?
Yeah, well, I mean, that what you say is, also being swayed by other people's opinions. We kind of started out talking about, was Wizard swaying other people with their opinions? Well, that's up to the individual. That's not
Right,
Wizard's fault. Wizard has a platform, so they're expressing their opinions. They're giving reviews of comics. They're promoting what they want to promote. Some of that is business related. We interviewed Gareb Shamus. He said we did a lot of pay to play. If people wanted to get featured in the magazine, they got to buy ads. If they want to get a booth at Wizard World and get special treatment, buy some ads. You got to support our magazine, and then you get to come to the party. Like, that was true. But what I'm saying is, if a person is reading that and saying, well, Darkchild, yeah, it's the best ever, Wizard said it was, and they want to believe that and they read it and they like it, that's good. But like, we can't, like, you have to like what you like ultimately. Like, somebody else telling you that what you like is bad, you don't have to fight them, but you can just say, well, but I still like it. So
right,
you're not changing, but you just stop the conversation. Like, especially if this is social media, people have a hard time with this, but it's just like, you just stop responding. Or if I was in a conversation with somebody, I would just walk away. I'd be like, we're not getting anywhere. I'm done. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I still think Quantum and Woody is one of the best books of the 90s. It's hilarious, and somebody, it's not good for this and that. I was like, I don't know. Christopher Priest does it for me. MD Bryant is great. So I'm just like, yeah, I like it. So I think it's okay to be confident in what you enjoy, but let's not come at each other's throats, because ultimately, and again, this is what my co-host on Wizards always tells me. He's just like, we're supposed to be having fun. It's
right,
comics. That's why we're here. Like,
right,
you can be real excited and passionate, but don't be a jerk. Like, just have fun with this thing. And especially if you're a creator, don't come after people, who don't like your stuff or criticize your stuff. It's just like, you have an audience here. You have this many fans, and there's this group over here that doesn't like you. Just ignore them. You don't have to
right,
fight them.
right. Yeah, that's the thing is I fall into that trap myself. I know I do. I tend to try to I go a few rounds and then I get back to, I mean, I still like it, so I don't know what to tell you. You're not going to convince me. I'm not going to convince you. Have a great day. And some people who are really, really hardcore, they're trying their best to convince me that the Marvels is terrible. Well, keep going. And I'm like, nah, that's cool. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what to tell you. You didn't enjoy it. That's on you. That's not me. Like,
Yeah.
I went and I saw that's going to be the next episode. Is I'm going to review Madam Web, and I mean the hate that movie got. I mean, beforehand, I was like, I'm fascinated. I want
Yeah.
to go see this just to see this train wreck happen. And then I watched it, and I was like, that was good. Got me in the feels a little bit. Now, I can be objective, from my perspective and what I know. Technically, there are a lot of technical issues. The most atrocious ADR I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. That
Oh
was
my god,
pretty
it's
rough.
terrible. But like for the most part, there was a couple scenes where it took me out of it, but for the most part, it wasn't bad enough that it took me out of enjoying the movie. It's happened before. I've watched movies where it's like That's not what you're saying. And it's like a close up on their face, like you're supposed to be looking at them. And I tend to look at people's mouths when they talk to like reinforce. I think it's because I didn't used to wear glasses, and I think I like trained myself to like watch people's mouths to like
Oh.
make sure I know what they're saying. Um, but like I tend to watch people's mouths. So especially when it's not the thing that they said while filming and it's an 80 yard, that automatically kicks in for me. But like there was a couple scenes where like I could tell, but I was engaged in the story, so it didn't matter. We moved on. There was even a thing I saw beforehand that like there's a shot where like you can see a boom mic. It's just like in the shot like this, just like right next to her face. But that's the thing is that shot, you're only seeing that if you're not engaged in the movie. Because I was in there, I was watching her face. I'm like, what's going? She's like scared, and there's all this stuff going on. The camera's panning. There's a lot of things going on. I didn't notice it halfway through the movie, and I was like, oh yeah, that was supposed to be that mic thing. I didn't even notice. So like, I think it's depending on like you said, everyone's gonna have that different perspective on it, and we gotta just let it happen. Like I'm gonna give my review. I'm not gonna tell anyone they're wrong for not liking it. You didn't like it, you didn't like it. I'm not gonna convince you. I'm gonna give my review, and we're gonna move on. Everyone, hopefully it'll get some engagement. Hopefully people will hate watch my review. you know,
Well,
but like,
yeah, I think you're right, because I went and saw it too, just because I was like, oh, like this, like number one, I was just like, why would you even make it a Madam Web movie?
agreed,
It just,
agreed.
and so you're just like, what are you gonna do with this? And what they did with it was so bizarre that I didn't walk out hating it, but I was just like, fascinating.
Yeah,
Every choice in this. What? How did this happen? Was it manufactured to be like this? Did they
I
know, or did it, no, concurrence of events, like make this strange stew?
I firmly believe that they could have renamed that movie Spider Woman or Spider Girl. Just change the focus to one of the other girls, made the same movie, 0% more superheroics, and it would have been received better. But it was just that taking this like third string character, fourth string, really. She was a supporting cast at best. It'd be like making a movie about Robbie Robertson, or hell, Ronnie Robertson, the son, the roommate of Peter Parker. Like what's his day to day like? That's the movie we want to watch. It's just this weird, like what a choice, what a choice.
It's fascinating. So yeah, and I do have to say one thing. If there is anybody who has listened to my podcast, they're going to say, okay, but you're talking about opinions are okay and you want to celebrate everybody, or at least allow them to have their opinion. But what about Rob Liefeld? And I
That
only
is
have
my
to
one exception. I am
yeah.
I am allowed, and everyone is allowed with zero judgment to fully hate Rob Liefeld.
Yeah, and for us, like we have he has an opinion about us, and it is
Yeah,
very influenced by his opinion of Wizard Magazine and how
right,
they treated him, which is somewhat justified. But he's also a guy who puts himself in a lot of situations to rile people up and then be criticized after the fact. And his art, there are a ton of people who were inspired by his art, loved his art,
right,
started buying comics because of his art. Okay, like we're not going to argue there. Like you like it, so therefore it is good because you've decided it is good. All right, that's fine. His comics, was the writing good? I don't know. I would say no, but you might say it was sufficient to go along with the action that I wanted to see, as portrayed by his
right.
his pencil and then his inking or whoever else he got to ink it for him. So all of that being said, like I think when you have like a beef with somebody, like if there's something coming up, and I'm sure in his mind he's like, I don't like those guys, but I don't, it's not my every waking moment I think about what they're doing. But he's
Yeah,
called us
right.
out a
I
few
would hope
times.
not.
But it's just like that I think it's okay to jab a little bit and have a little bit of fun, like with a creator's output, with another friend's opinion on a comic. You're like, oh man, you love Super Pro, that's your guy. And you're just like, But Super Pro is ridiculous and fun. They're like, no, it's awesome. Like it's just I love the NFL and they made him a superhero. They embodied the NFL in a superhero. I'm like, that's cool, dude. But like, but you can enjoy it on different levels. But I'm just saying, like, I think it's okay to have fun as long as you're not being malicious. And we all know when we're being malicious. We all know when we're being rude. We know
Yeah,
when we're doing it to be a troll and get a reaction out of somebody. And if that's how you get excitement out of life, just maybe rethink that part.
right,
Because, like, again, if you want to have fun if your fun is making people feel bad or making other people angry, like, I think unfortunately that exists in many things. That's not just comics. That's, politics, that's sports, that's whatever. You're gonna
right,
pick on all these things, but I just feel like if we can learn to have fun, not take ourselves too seriously, when you have a friend, you pick on your friend a little bit, but you're not trying to kill the relationship and hurt them.
right,
So, and if they don't like it, stop. you
right,
know,
right.
like,
And that's the kicker.
yeah,
I think that's where a lot of people don't know that it's not funny anymore. Like you've continued doing this thing. Someone has expressed that this is not what they want to participate in, but you're gonna keep doing it, and that's when it becomes too like it's too much. You can have like you said, you can have some fun, and I think that's kind of the level I'm at. I don't go out of my way to talk about Rob Liefeld. If the content comes up, someone's like, "Oh, Rob Liefeld's doing a variant cover of X-Men." If I'm in the mood for that day, I might take a few shots. And then I'm off to live my life. But there are people who will sit there and then I will see it, oh, tomorrow, and it's the next day, and they're still talking about how shitty his art is, or they're still talking about how bad a person he is, or whatever. Like it happens. And I'm like, you got nothing else going on? You guys nothing else that you could just take you away from the screen for 10 minutes. Because I feel like you just 10 minutes and you'll forget about this whole thing.
yeah. It's like, so I mean, if we could have fun, have some jokes, and honestly, I'll say again, growing up in the 90s, when you have Mystery Science Theater 3000, when you have Wizard and their irreverent attitude and
Yep.
criticisms of creators and comics and things that are happening, you start feeling like that's okay for me to do. And I'm just as funny or as witty as these professionals or these people. So
Right.
now that's the mode of communication, is mocking everything. And
Right.
I don't think everything needs to be mocked. Again, I say don't take everything so seriously, but also you don't need to cut everything down. Like, and that's the only way to communicate or get a laugh or make that your identity. Like, let's have some fun here, but let's also celebrate. Let's also praise some things that you find awesome, and also try to find the side of something that you enjoy. Like, again, like Fathom by Michael Turner. A lot of people love Michael Turner, okay? I look at his art, it is too posed for me. It is too static. Even when there's action, it's like he spent so long on this one panel. I could tell. Like, it was just everything is perfectly set up. Here's my hot take. No, this is my reality. When I need to zone out and go to sleep, if my brain is going a mile a minute, I will open up a Fathom comic and I will read it because it bores me to tears. The art bores me and the writing bores me. And
Wow.
but that's a good thing for me. I'm
Right.
like, I
For,
like
for, for the
Fathom
specific
for
purpose you're
this
using it
reason.
for.
It can do this, but I would never go to it for entertainment, but it has a purpose. And I think and I can also say his figures are beautifully rendered, his backgrounds, his detail. I can respect Michael Turner's art, but it does not excite me on any level. I do not go, oh, how beautiful this is. Like, it doesn't do that for me, but it does it for a ton of people.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make their opinion less. And I respect their opinion and I respect his artistry, but I can also say it puts me to sleep. And that's
Right.
I hate to say it's my truth. That's kind of overused these days, but it just
Right.
is. Like, that's where I'm at when I need to zone out. So I think that's another thing, is you can have respect for something without it actually being something you enjoy. And we could try to have a little bit more respect in our fandom for other people's fandom.
100%. 100%. That I don't want to jump into the Star Wars fandom too much because it's a whole thing. But like you see that a lot with that. There are people who are diehard, from this most recent trilogy, there are people who are diehard Last Jedi fans. They're just like, oh, it's the best one. And then you have everyone else who's like, no, it's garbage. That was the garbage one. The first one and the third one are really good. And it's like everyone enjoys Star Wars. You're all in it for the magical space wizards with the lasers. Like that's what you're in it for. Like I I personally want a broader exploration of the universe. So like for me, the like Skywalker and Skywalker adjacent stuff, I'm bored. Kenobi came out and I was like, I have no draw to see it. None. I had no, like I like all the actors. I like everyone involved. I had no draw to see it. And I was like, "Heck, Vision's outstanding. So cool. Love seeing the little different approaches to the universe, different styles. Fascinating. But like more Skywalker stuff, I feel like that story's done. We've done it. I want to know about that kid from the Last Jedi who like grabbed the broom with the Force. I was like, follow that kid. What's he do? Does he become like a little pickpocket? Does he like become like the local protector of his little town? Like, I'm interested,
Yeah,
But that,
I
but
think
every, but there are
because you
people who are like,
mentioned
fuck that kid.
yeah, they hate that idea. It's too cutesy, whatever. Yeah, but it's just like you said, everything's a multiverse now, and it really is. We kind of
Yes,
have to accept that, like, there isn't just one truth for what is the right version of something, especially like things that have been around for 30 years, for 60 years, for 80 years, like these characters that have been interpreted so many different ways. Like, again, you can have personally the one that connects to you most, but honestly, like they are meant to be interpreted by everybody in a different way. Ultimately, they belong to the world. There's not, one version of them that you
right.
have to go by. And I think that's wonderful. Like a character like Batman. Do you like the comedic Batman? Are you a Batman 66 fan? Did you like that? What was that Merry Christmas Little Batman thing the on Amazon, that just came out recently?
Forgot about that. I didn't watch it, but I saw the art and
Merry
I was
Little
like,
Batman, yeah.
I can't. I don't. So I couldn't even bring myself to get to it because I saw the art and I was like, I know.
Yeah, but then like Spider-Verse is literally like a mishmash of everything in one. And look how beloved that is. So how can you say like,
First
well, I
one
don't
did
like
great. The
this, I don't
second
like
one
this,
did
I don't.
even better. Like,
Yeah. So it's just like we live in a multiverse society. It's okay to accept that there are other versions and celebrate the one you like. But I think it's just I mean I come from a mindset, I think maybe you do, like from when we grew up there was like there's the continuity, there's the version of the character, but even then like with Batman it's like, okay, are you saying like the Denny O'Neil, Adams version, like Neil Adams stuff, like that's Batman, or are you saying Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, which is totally its own thing, is Batman because everybody elevates that. And then Tim Burton says, "Oh, well, this is the basis for my movie. Now you like the movie." See, that's what Batman should be. It's like, no, again, like it can go so many different ways, but let's enjoy that. Even, get back to Star Wars, like Andor, like it totally different, right? Than
right,
everything. You're just like, okay, this is interesting, a different side of the universe, like you said. So I just I'm excited by the world of possibilities that
right,
exist, and I think we'll never know it all. We'll never experience it all. We can't experience it the same way as another person does, but sometimes we find those people that we connect with and they get it the way we get it. But there's people who interpret it differently. Let's enjoy them as well.
right,
Let's get their take back. Oh, you like that because of this. Okay. Like a manga Batman is not going to be for me. Or there's this anime that came out years ago, like right after I think Batman Begins. Maybe it was after The Dark Knight. Remember, there was like all these different anime
yeah, yeah,
interpretations of that. And like, so just like, again, like that's not going to be for me. But I could say people love this stuff. Now they have, an anime version of Batman for them. Awesome. Good for
yeah,
you because that's what you've
yeah,
been waiting for. Cool.
yeah. I mean, it's like right now, the most popular. Speaking of anime, the most popular anime is not stuff that I'm really into. I'm looking at like specific stuff, specific shows from like 90s, 80s, early 2000s. That's more my jam. I found myself in the last 2 years drawn really heavily to Gundam. I don't know why. Like I've always been a fan of the designs. I always thought the robots were cool, but I never like had this like, all right, I'm gonna go watch it. But I don't know what it is. The last couple of years, I'm like, man, I'm like trying to figure out what's the best order to watch it in. Like I'm trying to, because I'm a chronological guy. But there's multiple times that's a multiverse in and of itself, the whole Gundam thing, you know. But it's like everyone's gonna like different stuff. Like I see people like, oh, Jujutsu Kaisen is their favorite, or people are like Demon Slayer, and it's like I like the first season, but there was almost too much goofiness for me, so like it didn't really like catch me to get into the next season. There was definitely some great moments, some great, fantastic storytelling even in that show, but some of the goofy stuff was all like, like I'm not really into that. But whereas I thought the exact opposite of was it Akame got killed. The first episode, I was 3/4 of the way through. I was texting my cousin because he was the one who recommended it. I was like, I don't think it's gonna be this one, dude. He's like, watch it till the end. And the literal last scene, I was like, oh, oh, this is super serious. Because it was very much like, young man, sexy girl, he's head over heels. And then it was just like bloodbath. And I was like, oh, I have questions now. Now I'm in. Now you bought me. You brought me back. You brought me back. So it's
Well,
like different stuff is gonna hit you differently.
yeah, getting opinions like to if you want to choose to be more well-rounded or not have the tunnel vision, like I often say on our podcast, like anime is not for me. Like it never connected with me. I thought it was too cutesy, even though not all anime is cutesy, but
Sure.
that's
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my mind. That's what I'm
Right.
thinking. But back in the day, I said, well, let me see if there's one that works for me. And I found the Guyver, and I love the
Mm,
Guyver. And I've sampled other anime and none of it has ever caught me, but that is mine. Like, so I can say, look, I know anime, I understand some tropes, and I like this, and this one works for me. So I can't say blanket statement anime is not enjoyable, you know? So I think that's important too, is to say, like, it's like, I don't want to, in my mind, I don't want to read a cowboy comic. That's what I think. But then I'm
right.
sure there's something out there. There's some great Western comics that I should check out, and be like, I know DC did a lot back in the 90s.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, let me see, so like there are genres that don't immediately spring to mind, but like good storytelling is good storytelling. There's got to be something for me that I can sample. So I try to broaden as much as I can here and there. Just like, well, let me try this one finally, and let me
Yeah.
see. Even in the case of Rob Liefeld, like I had zero interest in his stuff back in the day. I never bought it, but we've been reading all the different series that come out, because I want to get the full picture. Like, am I wrong in my opinion of him? So far, no. But like there might be something that catches me eventually. Maybe it's his modern stuff. Maybe I need to check some of that out and see. I don't know. So
I'm gonna this. I found this. I don't remember how I came across it. It might have been like an Amazon suggestion or something. It's called. I want to say it's called like Day of Armageddon or Armageddon something. But it's a Rob Liefeld book.
huh.
I'd never heard of it. It was just like something came up in a suggestion. I was looking at something else and it was like, check this out. And I was like, what? And I haven't read it yet, but it's like it's his stuff, but it's more the color was like done in the more like digital painted style.
Hmm.
So it's very much a different looking book than I think any other Rob Liefeld book, which is why I was like, all right, I'm gonna give this a shot. I'm gonna give this an honest shot. I still haven't read it, but when I flipped through it, I was like, did not expect it to look like this. So I'm like, I'm interested. And it's more like military stuff. I don't believe it's very superheroics or anything like that. So I'm interested to get to it. But that was just one of those like, didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I was gonna
but yeah,
say, listeners of the podcast, you said Western, and I had like a whole thing with my buddy Ben. He does a series called Frontier Forever. It is Western, but it's like futuristic, and it's all this stuff that I if you had said, hey, read a Western about a marshal trying to like solve a murder, eh, okay, I'm not really in like that sales pitch, not there. But then it's like talking mutated animals, like cyborgs, like symbiotic AI. I'm like, okay, not, I'm in. I'm in. It's like all these little bits and pieces, and it's really like he like took this thing, he took this concept of Western that I was kind of iffy on. Like that, there's movies that I like, but it's never been like something I go to. And he's like, I'm gonna take every other thing you like, and I'm just gonna jam it in here. Space dogfights, like despotic overlords, post-apocalyptic Earth, and I'm just like, yes, tell me more. And I ended up reading the first issue of the comic, which is a prequel to the novel that he had already put out by the time I got in touch with him. And I ended up listening to the novel, and I am like messaging him as this stuff is happening. And then the book ends, and I'm like, how dare you? How dare you stop there? We built up this thing and now it just stops. When is the next one? I was so in, and I was like, you know what? 3 months ago, if you had told me that I was going to be like super into a Western book, I would have laughed at your face.
Yeah, I just had a similar experience too, with because I'm not really I like horror movies from the 80s just for the kitsch value and all that kind of stuff. But like I'm not like a horror guy. I don't read Stephen King. I don't buy horror comics. But like, my co-host on Wizards, Michael Schwartz, he's got a comic coming out right now. It's called Armored, and it has a real like horror bent to it. It's like horror adventure. It's about this, kid who finds this mystical suit of armor, but it's inhabited by a ghost, and the ghost then, is his
I'm
companion
in.
and has to train him, but he's got to fight all these monsters that keep coming after him and all this stuff. And there's like a zombie kid that comes back. There's all sorts of awesome stuff
I'm
in this
in.
book. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you're the indie hype man. This is an indie book that's coming out from Clever Press, but like I would never, like, just based on the covers, even there's an awesome Jay Lee cover that he got to do for the
Jay
first issue.
Lee.
Yeah.
Jay
And
Lee
I
should
looked,
do every anything horror or moody. Jay Lee should do a cover for it
yeah,
forever.
but I've never liked Jay Lee, so
Oh, interesting.
I wouldn't have bought that book. And then he gives it to me and he's like, just check out the first issue. And I was like, do you have any more of these? He's like, yeah, I did. I'm up to issue 5. And I'm like, send them all to me, please, even before they're out, because the book doesn't come out till April. But I was just like, and he had a
Oh, you
Kickstarter
got you
for it,
got like early
so
access.
I've read the whole series that's done up to this point, and I'm like, this is amazing. And it's not because he's my friend, and it's not. I mean, he's a professional screenwriter. I mean, he does
Sure.
that. I should have known, but I was just
Right.
like, I mean, a lot of people write comics, and a lot
Yeah.
of people have a project. I'm like, no, this is like good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's getting
Look.
quotes from
Like
all
you said,
sorts of
like you
people.
said, I am the indie hype man. I love the indie space, but there are tiers. There are
Yeah,
levels of quality for sure across the board. Like there are certain people who they're like, all right, ready to go for another Kickstarter. And I'm like, yes, yes, you are. Cause I know you've been writing, I know you've been doing stuff. And there are some people who are like ready to go for another Kickstarter. And I was like, you want to just like finish up the last one before you move on to the next thing, like because your track record is not showing that you are ready for the next thing. But like there are some people who just go and go and go, and then it's like, oh, this is going to be late, and then this is going to be late, and then this is going to be late. Have you considered just putting something out, getting it done, and then moving to the next one?
exactly. There's one more I want to bring up just because, again, like what I'm saying is I need to give indie books more of a try because it's not my space. It's not like I'm literally just going back to stuff from, the big two, the big three, big four, if you want to count Dark Horse. Like I'm just trying to find old stuff because I'm reading along with Wizard. But like there's so many exciting things coming out. And one of our patrons actually, like, I was able to ask him for a copy of his comic because I didn't even know he was a comic creator. And I was like, oh, dude, you have a comic? He's like, yeah, it's on Kickstarter. It just got funded fully, like in one day.
Awesome.
And then he sends it to me, and it's called Gun Punch. And his name is Fernando Pinto. This book is so much fun.
I
I don't
feel
know if
like
you've
I
heard
saw
of
that
Gun
already.
Punch. Yeah,
Gun Punch.
Gun Punch. And it's just like, it's kind of like, um, I mean, how can I describe it? I mean, it's basically like this kind of guy who has like the worst day ever, so kind of the beginning of Wanted, and then he gets it infected with this alien bio armor, and he basically gets conscripted to save the universe. And so he's got this AI type of like mentor that's programmed into it, so it's kind of a Blue Beetle thing, maybe a little bit in that way, or Firestorm, if you want to go back in the day. He's got this person that's training him and teaching him, but it's also like Guy Gardner Warrior, where he could create any weapon weapon out of his body during that era. Like it has that power. So, but it's just like it's got really fun, like cartoony art. It's got great dialogue. It's just like a whole lot of energy. And I was just like, again, if I saw this book and somebody hadn't put it in my hands, I would have said, again, not for me. And then I
Right.
read it, I'm like, this is like really cool. Like this is a fun, just a fun series. You know, it's not trying to be awesome. It's not trying to be dark. It's just trying to be a fun adventure series. And yeah, so I mean, and again, just the name, it's fun to say gun punch, you know?
It is. It is. I see that it's being put out by Rocket Ship. I came across them. My first experience with them was when they put out a Stan Lee book recently. Uh, it took a while to get, so I'm hoping that the fulfillment's a little faster this time around. But no, I mean they've got a lot of titles, so that's a good publisher that he's with. I mean
Oh,
the
great.
stuff came when it finally came. It came great, like it came in really good quality.
Cool.
So, but that does look interesting. He's already at 100, was it 120%? Where's the percentage?
Yeah, yeah, because it's like
127%
it's doing well.
already. Already 25 days ago. This just started. This just
Yeah,
started.
and
Gun
the
Punch,
word
one
got
word.
out.
Check it out.
Yeah.
The Kickstarter. No, but yeah, that's the thing is a lot of people. I'm the same way with movies. Like I said, I don't seek out Western, but my wife has been like, "Hey, we ended up watching True Grit, both versions back to back," and I would in no universe would I've been like, "Yeah, let's watch a oh my God, what's his name? The original True Grit,
John Wayne?
John Wayne." I would have never been like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, let's watch a John Wayne movie." Like in no universe. It's just like let's watch the original and let's watch the new one. And I like both. I like both for like different reasons. And but again, I wouldn't have sought it out. Certain ones where it's like it's actors that I like. So like 310 to Yuma, the more modern one, I liked everyone in that cast. So I was gonna watch it because of the cast. And I feel like that's less and less of a thing nowadays. Like there's very few movies where I'm like, I'm gonna go watch this because I'm really into this actor. But like when that came out, it was like 09, 2010 or whatever. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna watch this because Batman's in it. Like I'm watching it because Batman's in it. Like that's why I'm watching it.
Well, what that's making me realize is, we're the topic is opinions. It doesn't make you less of a person if your opinion changes. If you're
Also,
open to allow
very
that to,
true.
because a lot of times, like that's our identity, right? Like, oh, well, yeah, I know, but I've been this guy for so long. This is my thing. Everybody knows this is what I love. But now I'm saying I like romance comics. It's like, but I do.
Yes.
It's just like it's okay. Like your opinion changed. You wouldn't have liked him. You tried him. Now you do. Like that. You're just a more well-rounded person now. And again, like sometimes we get in our little box and we're just like, I don't know. People are not going to like it. It's like, no, it's okay. Do what you want to do. Like share what you like now. And if people have a problem with it, it's just like, who cares? Just that was always my thing. Like growing up, I was a little bit of an outsider because I kind of always did my own thing. And I like I don't know, I'm trying to instill that in my kids where it's just like if you like it, you just got to stick with it. Because if you go and try to do what everybody else is doing and it's not your thing and it's not going to stick, and then you're jumping on the next trend and the next trend and the next trend, like who are you though? Like you got to find that. And so
Right.
like I luckily just was weird enough that I was just like, but I don't want to do that, like so I'm not gonna like what you like just because everybody else is telling me that's what it's supposed to be. And
Yep.
yeah, it'll serve you well in the long run, I feel like. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, dude, this has been fantastic. This has been such a great conversation. You always bring the noise. Like you're a great interviewer and you're a great interviewee. You're a great discussion person. You are the king of the transition. Like the way you refer to like previous points, I forget shit. I forgot what we started the conversation with. But you're just like, oh yeah, this actually ties back to what we said earlier. And I'm like, oh, it does, doesn't it?
oh, well,
Like,
thank you for inviting me because yes, I always love having a discussion with you. I find you're very informed and the opinions come out, but I never feel like again I'm being attacked. It's like no, this is seriously what I'm thinking right now, and so it's always a pleasure. Let this maybe be a model. This is the way you
yeah,
can have a conversation and disagree or agree on certain points.
yeah, like you do not read a lot of modern mainstream comics, right? You're
No.
very much like the 90s and before. Whereas I'm like now, I'm into the now. Whatever's happening now, I'm always there. Like I said before, is I'm not driving the car. I'm just along for the ride. I always say I'm an X-Men fan regardless. So if it's a story I don't like I didn't like necessarily all of the Inhuman era when they were fighting the Inhumans, but I'm riding with the X-Men, so I'm seeing where this car's going. I'm in for the ride. I'm not there to try to steer. So, I'm we have completely different perspectives on comic books as far as the medium itself, let alone creators. Like you said, there are creators who people are bringing up from the now that you're like never heard of them, literally never. But they're like because earlier you were talking about the covers, and I was like, oh yeah, that's like it's like Art Gem. Everyone wants an Art Gem variant, and it's like you may not know who that person is. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep that comment to myself. But like a lot of people right now are just like, oh, they're doing an Art Gem variant of this Spider-Man or whatever. I was like, cool, yeah, because those are the people that are slabbing the Art Gem variant, so they can stare at it, so it'll increase value or whatever. But it's like everyone has their own unique perspective. Like you know a lot more about other 90s stuff. Like just honestly, I was always fascinated by the Kiss stuff. And when you cover Kiss, you have such an honest passion for it that I'm like, this sounds really cool. Like, this is really, really cool stuff to listen to. It might not be something that I'm even going to listen to. It might not be something I'm going to read. I'm not going to lie, though. The art on those comics was really good. The Psycho Circus, so I might actually pick those up. But like, it's very much like I am intrigued by the story, even though it's not something that I've always been like, oh man, I really want to check it out, or even been like into. Like I've heard their stuff. I'm not big into their music. It just is what it is. But like hearing you talk about it, like I always say, I love listening to people talk about the thing they're passionate about because you hear it. You hear it in the voice. You hear it in the way they present the information. There's a young lady who's on TikTok and social all over the place. She's an audio engineer in like Hollywood. She talks about like waveforms and the way you record things. And I'm like, I know this much about what you're talking about, but I am fascinated like the way she is into it, like the most into as anyone I've ever seen about audio. And there's people that are into that, like, all sorts of different stuff like that. That stuff I've never considered, stuff I've never thought about. I watched a whole documentary the other day about ElfQuest. I remember seeing it in Wizard, seeing ads for it, and I was always kind of like, it's a little like cartoony, like, and it's black and white, like yourself. Like I wasn't really big into black and white stuff, so I was like, meh, not really into like it's not really something I'm going to seek out. And I watched this documentary, and they interviewed the creators, and I'm like, the everything around it is fascinating, and I might be buying this whole run of ElfQuest to check out ElfQuest because I'm like, wow, there's just like so much to it. It's like a personal story. It's like so autobiographical in aspects, and I'm like, now I'm interested.
Hey, I got to show you this just real quick, just on the
Mhm.
Kiss front. So, I love old magazines, and I was in
Yeah,
a thrift store yesterday and I hit on a gold mine for a Kiss fan, which is okay, 16 magazine. This is from the 70s,
I
but if
was
you're
gonna
looking
say
for
that looks old.
it's very old, and there was a whole lot of them. Like it was a huge number. And I start flipping them over, and I'm like,
Nice.
yes, they were heartthrobs in the 70s. And I
Really?
was able to pick up like all these, it has all these interviews with them, like just like,
That's
are
awesome.
you married, Paul Stanley? I'm having too much fun with the girls right now. Like it's hilarious to be in that context of that era with them, which was not because I got into them in the 90s during Psycho Circus and all that stuff, right? You're talking about the comic. So that was just so exciting to me to come up and be like, I can't believe it. Now I got like 15 issues of the 16 magazine with all these exclusive interviews. So
That's awesome. I want to show you, since you pull something out. I think I showed you the outside of this.
yeah,
This,
yeah.
it is a fascinating. So I've never seen this before. It was in the same box as all the wizards and stuff. It's called a keepsake collection. So this is like a printed on envelope. This is on the envelope, and then it had a bunch of prints of Liefeld stuff. And I'm very much like, as we just discussed, not my thing. I'm not a big fan of his art, but just the history of it. So we've got like prints of the cards and prints of a bunch of the covers, stuff that I don't think he's ever seen card form. So it's in like
Yeah.
this one sheeter. There we go. It's facing the wrong way. And it's like a bunch of black and white printouts of a bunch of different covers of X Force. and I was like, this is really cool. And it's all original. Like it's you can see it's like yellowing. It's been around. But I was just like, I had never heard of this. I'd never seen such a thing. This feels like something I should throw on eBay for the Rob Liefeld historian. You know, the Adam Pope of Rob Liefeld is out there somewhere, and
Put
he's
my bid
looking for
in.
this.
Yeah, well, that feels like something that would have been in a previews catalog. I've been going through previews catalogs from
Okay,
the early 90s recently, and I bet that's one of those sets where I was just like, what does that mean? And I think that's what it's got to be.
let's
Like,
see. I wonder if it has anything else on
because
here.
I know you said it said Comic Images, and they're the ones who did like the early like X-Men and Spider-Man, and then the image
Right,
cards, like the ones that were just panels that were pulled from comics.
right,
And it
right, right,
looks like
right, right.
they had something to do with just creating like you say, a large format set of those types of things. So
Oh, you know what?
that's
I didn't even
great.
read this. It says, okay, so let's see if everything's in there. Six giant 6x9 laminated black and white trading cards of the covers of issues 1 through 5. And the six is an original piece of artwork made especially for Comic Images by Rob Liefeld. And it is because there was one that I'm like, I've never seen this piece before. Let's see. Yeah, it's this guy.
Oh, there you go.
So it's like
Wow.
a one-off, and and it says all six pieces are also done in full color on the one sheet, packed in a specially printed collector's envelope. This product limited to 5,000 numbered copies. This is 454, 0454.
Now you got to
Low
meet up with
number.
Rob at a convention, get that original signed. Come on.
And then he'll recognize me and then he'll block me finally. All right, man. This has been a blast again. Thank you so much for jumping on. It's been a minute. I haven't done an episode since like the beginning of the year. So I was like, I really want to get into it, and it just felt like the right moment. So thank you. I appreciate your time. And as always, it has been a pleasure. Why
Yeah,
don't you let
always
people know
glad to
where
be
they can
here.
find you and listen to your podcast because it's dope.
Yeah, so you can find us at Wizards Comics on all the socials if you want to see what's going on with Wizards, the podcast guide to comics, where we re-examine the 90s comic book boom through the pages of Wizard magazine. We cover every issue, the specials, we go behind the scenes, we have interviews with the people who are actually making the magazine, but we also post a lot of scans from the issues on our social media. So if you go to whatever platform is your favorite, you'll find us. But also, wizardscomics.com is where you can go to download over 260 episodes. We've been doing it for a little over 4 years now. And so we're going into 1999, so that we're finally entering the year 1999 in our coverage of the magazine in that timeline. So some people are saying, oh, this was my first issue ever. And it was like the end of 98. So if this is your era, it's a great time to hop on board. You can also find, I do a whole bunch of other like nostalgic podcasts for Geekster, which is formerly the Retro Network. So you can go to the retronetwork.com and you can find another show of mine called Remember That Show, where we talk about obscure, forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. I'm actually launching another one. You were talking about the passion and like hearing people's excitement. It's called Geek Out. And the idea is there are people who are known for their one fandom, right? They're like, oh, this is like the authority on this movie or whatever, this toy line, whatever.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
bring them on to say, what do you never get to talk about? But secretly is like this thing you're obsessed with, but nobody, it's not a popular topic or whatever that everybody wants to hear about. And then, like the first episode, lunchboxes. He collects vintage lunchboxes. Who's talking about that? We get into this whole history, like, so just fun things like that. So if that seems like it might be up your alley, you want to find somebody's passion and hear it, maybe you share it, maybe you'll get into it because of it. Check out the Geek Out podcast, which is coming out soon on Geekster. So
Hold on. Do you have Shaq on your first episode? You're Shaquille O'Neal. Did you know? Fun fact: Shaquille O'Neal collects lunchboxes.
wow,
Yeah,
no.
that's why I said that. And it's true. Are you having Shaq on? Because somebody said they had him on an interview and they were like, what's a thing that you collect that no one knows about? And he said lunchboxes. And I like did a double take when I saw the clip because I was like, Shaq?
Well, the guy who we do have on, his name does start with SHA, but it's Sean Robert, he's an authority on the movie The Monster Squad. He's like the ultimate
Great
fan.
movie. I love that.
Awesome movie, and that's like his obsession. He's very known for it by the cast, by everybody.
Oh wow,
But then I said, "What do you want to talk about?" He's like, "Lunch boxes." I'm like, "Let's get into it. Let's find out why you love them." So it was a great
that's
conversation.
awesome. That's a dope
Yeah,
concept. I like that. I like
yeah.
that. And then you also have your
Oh, rental return,
rental returns.
tales from
Yes.
the video store. If you miss the old days of going and renting a tape at Blockbuster or your local mom and pop store, whatever it might have been, we interview former video rental store employees. We have 4 seasons. We're just wrapping up the
Oh wow.
fourth right now, and it's just fun conversations with people that were doing this thing that we kind of all took for granted, and now it's gone. And so to get the history and the crazy stories of what went on in these stores, like rental return tales from the video store. That's also, you can find that on the retronetwork.com or just search that, at Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. So
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for this one, folks. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will see you in the next one.
You gotta hold me first. Yeah, but I've been a dick. Never got my credit, now they dipping for the end of it. I'm about to benefit. Way up. Sorry who I use and day up. New whip pocket in the back. I may